Since the dawn of time, kids have loved gross-out toys, and the 80s excelled in them. So, in this episode, we're going to take a look at some forgotten gross-out toys. So, stick around. Hello fellow dorks and dorkettes, and welcome to Plastic Ghosts. My name is Rob, and this is the show where we talk about those forgotten toys that seem to haunt our memories and the toy aisles of our youth. In this episode, we are talking about more of the forgotten gross-out toys of the 1980s. These toys were marketed as being gross, zany, and just off-kilter in different ways. Now, like I said, since the dawn of the toy industry, there have been gross-out toys and gross-out collectible cards. It was collectible cards like the Garbage Pail Kids that catapulted gross-out toys to every toy aisle and every kid's toy box during the mid to late 1980s. The trend, of course, continued throughout the 90s, and there are still remnants of it today. But it was just something about the 80s, under that boom of Adam Bomb himself with the Garbage Pail Kids, that just really cemented gross-out toys into the toy history books. But anyway, let's get to the gross-out toys with number one. Number one on the list comes from Lanard Toys, and it was released in 1986. Now, that is definitely the sweet spot when we get to gross-out toys in the 80s. I mean, this was around the time, of course, Garbage Pail Kids were on the market and Mad Balls. This toy line takes a healthy inspiration of both, and it is called Trash Head Spitballs. Now, if you remember in our first Gross-Out Toys episode, we talked about a toy brand called Spitballs that was released by Intertech in 1989. A whole 3 years after these Spitballs were released. And what I find really odd about the whole situation is Lanard is very famous for borrowing inspiration from other toy companies to produce toys. So here we have Intertech, who was a much bigger toy company at the time because of their battery-powered, kind of combat-accurate squirt guns. So for a company like Intertech to find inspiration from Lanard, I find that just really mind-blowing, actually. Now, of course, Lanard was a pretty big company, but like I said, they took a lot of inspirations from other people. So I guess it's just desserts that someone took inspiration from them. Anyway, the Trash Head Spitballs were a collection of 6 different shaped heads that, like I said, were a just nice mashup of Mad Balls and Garbage Pail Kids. You had characters such as Cracked Carmen that, of course, had a cracked open head with brains leaking out. You had one that was named Stone Steve, and not like you think, he actually had rocks embedded in his head. Of course, was par for the course at the time. You had Wormy Willie, that was just pretty much normal looking, but vomiting worms out of his mouth. Now, like the Intertech Spitballs, these Spitballs were practically the same thing. You could fill them up with water, squeeze them as a squirt gun of sorts. The one thing that looks vastly different, though, is these actually had a little plug in the back, kind of like those, clear, cheap water guns that you could pop out, fill it with water, and then squeeze. So, unlike the Intertech squirt balls that you just submerged in water and squeezed so it would suction up water, and you squeezed to shot it, and you squeezed to shoot it. So they were a little bit different. And to give Intertech some credit, their Spitballs line featured different franchises such as Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street or Jason from Friday the 13th. So yeah, a little bit different, but I'm going to give the points to this one to the Trash Head Spitballs because Yeah, it was a completely new and novel idea at the time. Sorta. Our second gross out toy comes from a company named CID and was actually released in 1983. It comes all the way from Italy and its name is Spuzzy. Now, I am a horrible international linguist, but I will try to pronounce what the packaging says. And it says, Monstre della Puzza di Collezionere, which translates to stink monsters to collect. Now, Spuzzy were squishy toys with smells embedded in them. There were 5 in total, with such names and scents as, let me get this right, Alito Catavino, which means bad breath, Cloaca, which I couldn't find a definition for or a translation for, so I assume that's probably slang of some sort, Vomito, which is vomit, Caca, which of course means poop, and Pesse Morto, which means dead fish. Now, like I said, the Spuzzy figures were just little squishy and stinky monsters, creatures, and beasts of different types. I mean, they had different, fangs and maws and eyes and tentacles and things like that. So their names didn't really reflect what type of creature they were. They were just a mishmash of different little squishy monster toys. And they're pretty cool. Now, if these were released in America a few years later, they would have been in every kid's collection. Because what kid doesn't want a squishy little monster with a funky smell? Now, I can't comment on how they did smell, or if it was just one generic scent for all of them, and they just, attached different names. I don't know, but I think they're pretty cool looking, and of course, the whole action feature of stinkiness is a definite selling point. Number 3 on the list would definitely sell like hotcakes today if it was released, because they were made from that squishy foam that, different stress balls and fidgets are made from today. Now, these are the Mash'ems, released by Coleco in 1987. There were 10 in total. Now, they featured different characters like Basket Case, a basketball player, Biker Breath, that was a, crazy-looking biker guy, Double Header, a dude with a chainsaw with a severed head, Gun Nuts, your crazy paramilitary guy, Headlock, a professional wrestler, Killer Driller, the dentist, Pound Pumper, which could be taken a whole lot of different ways, but he's actually a weightlifter, Right Guard, that looks like a football player, Snake Brain, a zombie of sorts with a snake coming out of his fractured head, and Tongue Lungs, that looks like a punk rock kind of guy. Now, the action feature of these, if you will, was that they were those squishy foam, like I mentioned. So their whole thing was you can mash them, smash them, do whatever, but they always pop back up. Now, I remember these, and I think they were a little bit popular at the time. I'll have to take a look to see if I can find a commercial or anything, because I think these were like in every toy aisle at the time, because I can remember seeing them at Caldor, I think, mostly. That's where I found a lot of the gross out toys that I was able to pick up here and there when I was a little bit, of an older kid. But anyway, if I can find the commercial, I'll drop it here.
There's a whole new creature on the loose. Meet the Mash'ems. You can crush them, crunch them, but Mash'ems keep coming back for more. There are 10 different Mash'ems, each sold separately from Coleco.
Number 4 on the list comes from a toy company called 4Kids. And yes, that's numerical 4, kids with a Z. They were speaking extreme before it was trendy, but their toy was called Gurglin' Guts with a Z. Now, Gurglin' Guts was pretty much your Madball-esque inspired ball. The only difference was these were translucent, squishy balls that I assume had different, liquids in it that when you squeezed it, it would, splatter and move around and stuff like that. There were 4 in total, and yeah, as the name implies, there was a stomach with intestines, that's your guts. They had an eyeball, which all of the balls at that time had an eyeball. They had a heart and a brain. Now, this toy technology is still something you see nowadays, and it's applied to the fidget type of toys that are on the shelves. That squishy, liquid-filled mass that you can squeeze, and like I said, the liquids will splatter, gurgle, move, do all that stuff. These, in that year of 1986, might be one of the first, I don't know. But it definitely was unique when it came to the gross-out, Madball-inspired toys that were on the shelf. But again, I have to give props to 4Kids for speaking that leet-speak extreme dialogue and lingo before it was cool. I mean, this was before the X Games. This was before we were all extreme in the 90s. 4Kids was paving the way. Number 5 on the list comes from Marchon, and it was released in 1986. Now, Marchon was a toy company that I definitely know the name of. I think they had some limited successes here and there, and definitely that name appears all over my Forgotten Toys lists, but they were really onto something with this toy. This is the Goalyville Bat and Ball. Now, not to be outdone by all those companies releasing balls, they went one step further and released a bat to hit said balls. And hit people, I guess, if you want to. The Goalyville Bat is a work of art. Look at this thing. I mean, it looks like, it would be at home in an Evil Dead movie if Ash, pulled this out of the mouth of the Necronomicon and started beating deadites with it. It looks fantastic, and I would love to have one of these. This is something, out of all the things on this list, I am really looking forward to seeing if it still exists out there in eBay world and how much it goes for. Spoiler, it probably goes for a lot, just like anything that has a copyright of the 80s that a seller sees. Instantly mark up the prices. So the Goalyville Bat, I expect to be pretty pricey, and I think it's pretty rare. Now the packaging specifically says Goalyville Bat and Ball. And it's slightly disappointing that the ball that you get with it is just a plain ball. It almost looks like a racquetball, and it might have been. But like I said, there were plenty of other balls on the market, so yeah, they were staking their claim with the bat. And I would have loved to have this bat, but in 1986, I don't have any recollection of this ever being released, and yeah, I really wish I did, because this would have been awesome. Yeah, I always wanted Madballs, but like I said, this is a step up from that, so when people are trying to, dazzle you with their Madballs and throw them at you, you could be knocking them back at them, or just chasing them down with a baseball bat, and anyway, I've said way too much. So anyway, cue the spin cycle. Seems like an inevitability whenever I film, but like I always say, that's what happens when you multitask and you gotta do your chores and have some fun at the same time. But anyway, this was a look at 5 forgotten 80s gross-out toys. And the general theme of most of them were, that ball/sports world. Different balls, a bat, things like that. But we also got some unique little squishy things, and some from Italy that stunk. So, we're going to take this to eBay in the next episode and see what kind of footprint these forgotten toys have left on the landscape. I mean, leave it to, third-party sellers to, capitalize and find these little nuggets and charge you an arm and a leg for them. A lot of times, I don't think it's because it's a sought-after collectible. It's like I said, that they just see that it came from the 80s and they know that suckers like me and some of you just want to buy them up because of nostalgia. So anyway, tune in to the next episode to see what kind of suckers we can be with the crazy prices that they'll charge. Anyway, thank you for tuning in and checking out these forgotten 80s gross out toys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them and I love getting back to everyone. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this or any of the other episodes that YouTube is recommending down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you will be notified whenever there's a new episode. So anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad and stay dorky.